Assalamu alaikum. I'm hoping everyone is doing well, whomever, if ever, comes across this broadcast. So, uh, there are so many topics that I have, once I can, inshallah, get the time that I can come across in terms of things that I was putting together from the Quran. It's just so much. There's just so much information, alhamdulillah, that I can share. So long story short, there's this question that people ask. It's a very common question that's brought forth to the scholars or the orators. The question is, so if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows the past, the present, and the future, then why is it that we're still being tested? And of course, there's many different answers. There's, answers that were given by logical explanations that were given by, seeking informed individuals. But here's a different take on it. Also, if I were to give you some of the ayahs of the Quran as a part of food for thought. And this is from my understanding of it. Of course, you can take the Quran and you can take an ayat, and alhamdulillah, you can find so many takes, on one ayat. You can understand so much from it. So here's what I understood. If we look at a conversation in the Quran that was happening from between the malaikas and between Allah, in regards to also Adam alayhi salam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala taught Adam alayhi salam the 99 names, his 99 names, right? So when he taught Adam alayhi salam the 99 names, he went ahead and he asked the angels, he calls forth Adam and says, recite the names, right? So he goes ahead and, tells them what he was taught by Allah, right? But then, of course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks the malaikas and says, okay, he asks, okay, did you know those names? Right? As in, like, were they taught these names? So then the malaikas went ahead and said, no, by the truth, something of that sort, by truth, no, we did not know. Right? So they said, no, we weren't learned, and neither were we taught this, and we don't know what is it called, your names, so Allah had taught Adam, as we know, then his names, but had not taught the malaikas that point, right? So now what am I getting from this in terms of that? So you see how there's also, in this story, we can learn that there is witnessing and supporting evidence here too. What on earth do I mean by that? If we look at the judicial system of mankind today, when you go before a judge and you make a claim, what do you need to go ahead and make that claim? You need supporting evidence and witnesses, right? So that's man's court of law. But what do you think happens in God's court of law? Okay? And of course, he is perfection without any flaws. And he alone is sufficient as a witness to the accountability, right? And he alone is sufficient as a judge, right? But why did he call the angels to go ahead, and why was there questioning done? Why did Adam al-Islam go ahead and repeat the answer to his question? Like Allah questioned him, okay, I taught you this, say it, right? So now Allah is saying, I taught you this. So Adam al-Islam is supporting his truth. He doesn't need it. It is the truth. But he's supporting the truth, the word that was given to him. Right? Now, what's the other part? Okay, so the support is there. But then what else is there? The questioning. So now the angels are questioned. And look what they do. They testify from their own selves that, yes, my Lord, what you are saying is the truth. That, yes, so and so and so, we did not know of this. Right? So on the day of Qiyamah, or during our accounts, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, we will be testifying against ourselves. And yes, we too will be saying, yes, our Lord, this is the truth. This is the life we led. These are the deeds we did. And even when we come to, God forbid, for anyone, for whomever is going to be recompensed for their deeds, and whomever, God forbid, even if that be me, will come forth, right, to the guardians of the the gatekeepers for Jahannam. And when we will be asked, what has brought you here? We will say, we will testify against ourselves and say, okay, no, we had led that life. So now, of course, Allah knows our past, Allah knows our present, Allah knows our future. But in order for us to realize, for us to support His truth, to see that truth, not only to see that truth and support that truth, but to also witness our own lives and our own deeds, to testify against ourselves for either the good that we did or the bad that we did. We have to live out our destiny of the choices that we make. We have to live it out because we have to see it. He already saw it, but we have to see it for our own dalasa. You understand? For our own comprehension, for our own understanding. It's not for him. He already knows. But it's for us to show us that, okay, this was the soul that you had. You understand? You either had a good soul or you had a wicked one because you chose to stay wicked or in the darkness without the light. You understand? And where does the light come from? The light comes from following the word of Allah, and by following the word of Allah, living in that way through His word, right? Through the scriptures. That's what all the scriptures are about. His word, His way. You understand? So now that's how we would be testifying against ourselves, because we have to live it out. We're the type of creation that, you know, we want to see things. You know, we want to see things. You want to feel things. All these things, and some of us just don't believe. So that's one part. So we have to live our our life out in order for us to believe. It's nothing to do with his knowledge. His knowledge is incomprehensible. He's the judge. He could just decide. That's part one. Part two. What was part two? Part two was... I forgot. Okay. So I was watching a documentary. Oh no, sorry. Let's go back. I remember it now. About the punishment of Allah. Okay. The wrath of Allah. So now, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that those whom were, distracted or disbelieved will, on the day of judgment, will be raised up blind. Okay? Will be raised up blind. It really makes you think and ponder. Imagine somebody is terrifyingly beating the crap out of you, right? Beating the crap out of you. And you don't know who it is. I'm just saying, you just don't know. And your pain will stop at some point. They'll stop at some point. Right? They'll stop at some point. At some point they gotta stop, right? Of course, everybody stops at some point. The fight's gotta end at some point. But imagine you can't see who they are. What a tormenting punishment. Right? What a tormenting punishment. So imagine, right, all these warnings that Allah sent, all these cautions, all these reminders, all these things that you were supposed to pay attention to. You understand? And when you were supposed to pay attention, and even your loved ones or those people who are on the path that you hurt by completely staying distracted or completely, when you're distracted, of course you don't have time. You're not giving that time to learn in order for you to be able to believe. So distractions taking you away to turn you into a disbeliever. That's what happens when you're distracted. You ultimately become a disbeliever. Because you're not seeking the truth. You're not seeking the understanding. You understand? So you're not seeking that. So what happens when you don't have that understanding? You don't understand what's about to happen. Right? So if you don't understand what's about to happen, how are you going to be a believer and tremble and understand repentance and understand being grateful and understand how to live, a life in terms of the way that the Lord wanted, which is actually the perfection of the Lord in the most perfect manner that you can live in. So now, let's talk about every single time, a friend or a family member or somebody, with their hearts, whom had purified hearts and so much love in their hearts, and they came across you maybe once in their lifetime, twice, maybe 100 times, maybe 1,000 times, and they came and with, puppy eyes and big bright eyes, and they came to you and said, why don't you come for Salah, or, why don't you, read some verses, or why don't you do something good or great or something, like something related to the reminder of the day of Akhirah. And guess what? Oh, you know, you were too busy watching TV, or too busy playing video games, or too busy on the phone, or too busy doing whatever the heck it is that you're doing. But that call, that reminder wasn't important to you. So it could be your mother's reminder, it could be your father's reminder, it could be your sibling, it could be your spouse, it could be, uh, the imam, it could be a relative, it could be a friend, a family member, I mean, a neighbor, it could be anybody. Even the police people that would do that technically usually are closer to you, or they know you, kind of. They feel for you, or whomever it is, doesn't matter. Um, just somebody who is a well-wisher. And usually a lot of those times the reminder comes from those who are believers, and they are very affectionate towards the concern. So a believer is concerned about the akhirah. Not only are they concerned about the akhirah, but they know about Jahannam. And they don't only know, they cry for themselves. No, they don't only cry for themselves. They cry for those that don't know what on earth is about to happen. Because they themselves are scared. They would be trembling too. Because at first, before you became a believer, you were foolish. You understand? You were foolish, and you thought this, and you came into this dunya, and you're like, yeah, as Allah says, the mountains trembled. But you guys, nah, there's a race in the womb too, right? Out of 2 million sperm cells, you're the one damn well that's scientifically out there too, right? So you had a race with 2 million sperm cells, and you're the one who chose to run right into that womb. So you came on in and you thought you could do this. You're like, I got this piece of cake, If I could win this race, 2 million sperm cells, I could win that too. But little did, we humans think, just like modern times, we thought, okay, video games, yeah, we got this. You play video games, and then what happens when somebody goes into a real battlefield, and all these folks in the army and all these folks, and what happens to a lot of these people that go into the army? Psychologically, they're like, some of them are done for, because they didn't expect that in reality, whoa, this is what it's like. This is what it's like. So they come back all, shriveled up and everything. Like, some of them are gone. Like, So in that manner, like when we decided to take that test, we thought it was a piece of cake. Yeah, we got this. Just like a video game for us. But once we came into this dunya, Allah describes it as a difficult test. It is a difficult test. It is a difficult test. And now, in that manner, okay, in this difficult test, we thought we could do it. Right? But then those whom are believers, if there are any around you, they are concerned about you too. And they come and they give you the reminder. And what happens to those whom give the reminders? They get pushed away, especially when majority of us are distracted and we want to watch our TV series, or we want to watch this, or we want to do this, or we want to do something related to the dunya, have nothing to do with the akhirah. And you push them away, and you don't listen to them, because when they're talking, they're not talking about themselves. They're not talking about anything that's technically helping them. They're doing it because they know the repercussions, and you don't realize it. And they're doing it because, at the end of the day, they don't want you to be in that situation, because guess what? if you're gonna be raised blind, that wrath of Allah, which is never going to end. You can't even psychologically understand what it is. You can't comprehend what it is when Allah is telling you it is never going to end. It is never going to... What does never going to end mean? What does that mean, never going to end? Can anyone comprehend that? Because everything that we know has an ending. Our equations have an ending, right? Our lectures have an ending. Our life has an ending. Everything that we know ends at some point. But that which doesn't end, we don't have the slightest... Like, in truth, nobody knows what it feels like to feel the everlasting eternity, because at the end of the day, once you go over, you don't come back. You don't come back, one. And number two, it doesn't end. So how can you explain that feeling of it doesn't end? If it doesn't end, it doesn't even make sense. So can you imagine a painful punishment? The wrath of Allah is a painful punishment. You see, somebody goes ahead and, for a man, maybe they're smoking or something, and then they light a fire, and then all of a sudden the spark hurts their, the fire spark goes on their finger or their thumb, and all of a sudden, they just want to drop the lighter or something like that. Right? For a woman, she's cooking in the kitchen or something, and then, oh my goodness, the pan is so hot that she wants to go ahead and drop that pan. As soon as 1 second of pain comes in, you just even feel the heat. That's how you want to drop it. Right? But what is the wrath of Allah? Wrath of Allah has got to be the most painful, most fire. And he's saying that fire is for eternity. And this fire, this pain that comes from the fire, will never end. So whoa. So can you imagine facing... You can't imagine, right? But you can try to understand this. Can you imagine a painful punishment which will never end, and not even get to seeing who is punishing you? Who is punishing you? You can't even see that. You don't even know that. You can't even see them. You can't even see your Lord. So you're going to be getting punished forever and ever 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 and ever. Eons and eons and eons and eons and eons and eons. For something you can't even endure for 1 second. You can't even endure normal fire flame heat. You can't even endure that. So can you just imagine? Like, nah, you can't. You can't. So what happens? So now, how do the believers actually turn around that day and technically, wouldn't say mock, but feel like, like, I told you so? Because those very same people that you were warning to, these very same people, they didn't hear you. They didn't even hear Allah, because you were saying Allah's words, right? Or Allah's reminder. So they didn't hear Allah, let alone they didn't even hear you. They were ignoring you. You understand? They're too busy with their TVs or their dunya and this and this, and they didn't hear you, they didn't pay attention to you. So guess what happens on that day? That day, if you're not a believer, you're gonna be seeking for help from God, from your friends, your family, or whoever those believers are, right? Those people that were around, they give you so much time of their life trying to remind you, and you never once listened to them to ever take it seriously. You understand? In that time, Allah already says you can't help anybody. Not even the person you love the most in this world, you can't even help them. Right? So they're going to be turning to you to help them too. And guess what? Just like, you understand, they ignored you, it is only going to be an instinct that you will try, but you'll be bound. And on that day, you can't help them. You can't do it. Because that's just the system of Allah. He will allow you to do it unless He wills otherwise. But in instances, He doesn't even need you to ask, because guess what? He knew that your heart was compassionate. Your heart was merciful. I'm talking about the believers, right? Their hearts were merciful. They were concerned. But the disbelievers and those who were distracted, they weren't concerned. And they're always going to be like that. You're always going to be like that. Just imagine how fair Allah says is good and evil the same. Can you imagine the same person, thinking that life is a walk in the park? And yes, it can be, but it's a difficult one. So imagine that, this dunya was easy for him, and he had no difficulty, nothing in the test, right? At that moment, how is that fair to a believer whom actually had a difficult test, and they strove hard, and they tried to remind, and they tried and tried and tried to do, all the things that God would have, wanted them to do. And they didn't listen to you, let alone they didn't listen to Allah. So what happens to them on that day? Guess what? Allah doesn't hear them, and neither do you. And you think it's impossible to walk away? You understand? You think it's impossible to walk away from that judgment, right? No, you want to save your family, you want to save your friend, da, da, da. You want to, and you wish, but you can't save. It's only Allah that saves, right? It's only Allah that saves. So at the end of the day, you don't want to get punished from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, your creator, and not even know how on earth, you're able to maintain, this dunya. So that's pretty much it, I'm starting to feel sleepy, so I think I'm going to take a nap instead of doing the broadcast, but I think I gave you guys, food for thought at the end of the day. And that's when I know that's a signal for me to time out and fall asleep, because I'm exhausted. Yep. Alrighty, that's enough of my broadcast for today. Hope some of it made sense. Okay, hope some of it did. Inshallah it did. And I hope till next time we'll speak again. Bye bye.